So I was out in Montauk doing a story about the sort of waves of gentrification that had gone on there. And I thought, maybe I should go talk to some surfers. I hear this is a surf town. And I was like, and I was thinking, like, God, these people are intimidating. I don't know. And, they're kind of territorial, I've heard. So I go to the surf beach. And at the time, I was divorced. Didn't really know how I was going to be happy again. Didn't know how I was going to travel again because that was, I just didn't have a very good structure for doing a lot of these kinds of things. So. But and I thought surfing was like for crazy people, right? I thought about I'd see.
Kind of is.
Well, it is. I have learned that is in fact true. But I just would watch Wide World of Sports and see those crazy waves and think, why would anybody ever want to do that? So I got to the surf beach. It was, beautiful little knee-high, mellow waves. There are all these long boarders, like basically like dancing up and down their boards. And I just thought, what is this magical place? And these creatures, they look so powerful and free. And then I thought, maybe I could do that. I came off the beach. There was a little house for rent that turned out to be within my financial reach, right?
So that first
trip, this one moment,
goodness
and
gracious.
I literally
changed
my life forever. And I literally feel like I felt in that moment, I was like, the universe is trying to tell you something. You need to do this. And so I came out. I took a lesson. I was terrible. I spent most of my time in the water, under the board. But I got to my feet for like an instant, a couple times, and I was just like, what is this feeling? God. I have to have this again.
That's serotonin and dopamine.
And again and again.
Scared for you already, right? Just hearing this story.
So it really, it was kind of, and then from there I discovered that you could take lessons in Rockaway Beach. I could get there on the A train, which was just stunning to me because I just kept, you're going to have to take lessons, and I can't keep running out to Montauk all the time, right? So that's how it started. I started taking lessons with New York Surf School, Frank Cullen's outfit, and made a very good friend, Riva, there. Eventually decided I felt at my happiest in Rockaway, and so I thought maybe I'll get a little weekend place, right?
It always starts with that.
And then I found this tiny little bungalow, crazy little house,
so lucky now. Holy moly.
It really, I think back on this, I still get the chill sometimes when I think about how random it was, right? How totally random this whole adventure has been. And I'm like, what if I had not ever, decided to pitch my editor on a story about Montauk? What if I hadn't gone there? Like, who would I be right now? Where would how would I have found happiness?
I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that.
So
surfing just has a way of taking over, but also leading you to so many great things, but then also something like Sandy.
Something like Sandy. Not so great.
To quote the kid in Point Break who said to Johnny Utah, it'll change your life.
Yep. Yeah,
It really
like
does.
Surfing's the source.
It is, exactly. Nice quote.
One part of this story that really resonated for me, it's this idea that surfing is something you can't control. And then also I feel like I related to your story as a woman of color. I feel like, I went to an Ivy League school as well. And I feel like all the women of color I knew, there was so much about achieving, but it wasn't achieving just for yourself. It was an achievement because you're carrying the weight of generations of people who sacrificed so much for you. And to read the trajectory of your own great-grandfather in one lifetime, born a slave, and then not only graduated from college in Oberlin and was a teacher, that is tremendous. Yeah. But I also can imagine that is a heavy weight. As the generations, progress. And it seemed like it was, education was very important in your family. Right. And your father, there were a lot of issues, I guess. Right. Maybe I don't know if the weight of that or other things, but it sounded like there was, but then to the whole idea of perfectionism, and then there's this pursuit that you can't, you've excelled in so many areas of your life, even if you don't think you did. But it's that idea of I can't just, I got to be better. I got to, perfect so I got to be perfect. And of course, that's a fallacy. And surfing is the thing that is constantly poking holes at that idea.
Right. Well, so growing up, it was a very, achievement oriented household, and education was the thing that my parents felt was like, that's the only way that you're going to deal with racial discrimination. That's the only, right, is just to have more credentials, to be better and, smarter than, and so forth. And so I had this kind of fear of failure. And my dad was a very sort of, he was loving and funny and great, but he was also an alcoholic who could be mean and angry and very punishing. And so I had a lot of that kind of stew going. But what happened with surfing was that I just decided that I was not going to let that fear of failure stop me, because I felt like I had been feeling like I wanted to break out of that pattern for a long time in a lot of ways. And, it wasn't easy, and I had to kind of talk myself into it a lot of the time. And, I do write about it in the book. It took me so long to actually be even willing to surf in my new neighborhood, because I didn't want to look like a kook in front of my neighbors. And, so I drove to a different break with a surfboard in my car. Like,
it's
literally,
a rite of passage in surfing.
I guess, but I literally, when I drove, I was driving around with this 9.5 foot surfboard kind of over my head. I literally couldn't see. I could barely steer, and I was like, you're going to cause an accident.
Oh, God.
So you're going to have to go surf in front of people. But that's the thing about surfing. It's like when it's not like I was sitting alone in my room writing bad poetry that nobody sees, right? It's like when you fail in surfing, everybody sees you. So I just had to get over it. Right. And luckily, part of that was I got a lot of support from friends, a lot of them women who were just nurturing, but even a lot of the guys were just really, really helpful and, gave me tips on where to sit and when to paddle. And so that was really great.
Right. I think, were there a lot of women that you were surfing with that were at the same level as you, and thus made it kind of easier, because then it was just fun. You were just like, oh, look at how goofy we are, and you could laugh at each other. Right.
So part of it was that I made some friends through surf school. A bunch of us would just go out every weekend. And so, I always felt that I was the worst of the bunch and lagging behind, but we were all pretty much at the same level. So that definitely made it a lot easier. But I used to surf with Davina a lot when I first moved. So, and she's incredibly nurturing and and encouraging, but will also like push you. Right? Like she would come like knock on my door in the morning, like, come on, let's go.
Well, I think it's great. I think it's like mutually motivating. Maybe she needed to do that to motivate herself to go surfing. So you served a function for her as well.
Yeah.
I want to geek out for a quick moment.
Do it.
Okay, so you were one of the creators of Vibe magazine. Holy fucking shit. Like, people who do not know.
Royalty.
This is like hip hop royalty here. This is like, seriously.
We're not worthy.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Like, that, where did that come from? I remember being so aware of it because at the time, Scott Polson Bryant, he came out of my school and he was a year ahead of me. We had a lot of, like, we had mutual friends, and I always knew things. And then, like, where I was working in the music industry at the time, and Jonathan Van Meter was, like, really good friends with my boss, and he was always around, and like, I was just always so aware, and it was like, oh my God, if I could just be involved somehow. But it was just such a cool
we
magazine.
could have met back then.
Oh my gosh. Could have got you into surfing sooner, maybe.
Exactly.
Well, I wasn't really doing much surfing back then. I was floundering. But I think, I always bring that story up because I tried to access surfing before I saw a single woman in the lineup.
Wow.
And there was no internet and no nothing, and I could not access it. It was really hard. I could do it on vacation, like I think you mentioned in your book. You go to Costa Rica, and it's like easy, but then I can't tell the difference between that and the sloppy beach breaks here and somewhere else where it's like terrifying, and I'm just paddling out, and it was terrible, But yeah, so that time was much more for me, music, New York culture, nightlife, everything.
Yes. Oh, those were the days.
It was such an amazing, and it was such an amazing time for hip hop.
They really were. So yeah, Vibe was really, really exciting and fun for a while, and then it just sort of wasn't, and I ended up leaving. But that actually started because of Jonathan. So Jonathan Van Meter and I became very good friends working together at 7 Days.
Oh, okay.
So which went out of business, I think, around 90.
Uh-huh.
And Quincy Jones and Russell Simmons were working with Time Warner to start a hip-hop magazine.
Right.
And so they approached Jonathan, and then he brought me in to kind of conceive of the magazine, do a test issue, and which we did, and then we launched. And so it was just really, really fun. And I had been kind of freelance writing, doing a lot of culture stuff, like little profiles and record reviews for, I think, like Entertainment Weekly and Rolling Stone. And so I was kind of in this, I wasn't really in the business, but I knew a fair amount about it. And I was just a huge hip hop fan, right? I was just so
what a time.
amazed and surprised by how interesting this music was, both musically, but also really like lyrically, and what it said about Black people and identity. And, you know, it's like I grew up very middle class and went to predominantly white schools. And so it was really eye-opening for me, you know, to sort of get this different perspective through this incredibly creative force. And also, you know, getting to go out all the time.
It was a
fun.
good-looking magazine, too.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But it was also like at this really special moment in hip-hop when it was just like breaking out.
Right.
There were so many genres that were breaking out, and it was becoming, quote, mainstream, and now it was like so corporatized in another way, and there was so much money in it that it was like growing so fast, I think, faster than anyone could.
Well,
you know.
I seem to remember that this was also around the time of SoundScan, right? When instead of the radio stations having like reporting what was playing, there was actual like point of sale data.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think that just like revolutionized the charts. And I might have this wrong, but I seem to remember that like NWA hit number 2 on the charts, and so then it was like, okay, people, right? Like this is real, right? Start playing our records,
Right.
So,
that was incredible.
Yeah.
That was incredible. And then how did you transition out of that to the New York Times?
how did that happen? I'm trying to think.
You're commiserating, and you're at a bar, and then
I'm so old, I can barely remember. No, so what's that? I have to get my ear horn.
Did you say ear horn?
I did.
What's that?
What's that?
Got that ear
What's
horn
that?
right here. Let me get my monocle too.
What's that, Sonny? So I think what happened. So I left Vibe, and did I go to detail? I think I ended up going to Details for a little while, and then John Leland, who was the editor who brought me in, I think he got pushed out. Joe Dolce came in, and then I decided, I was like, I want to be a writer. Now is finally the time for me to break out of my editing shell and be the writer that I meant to be. Right. And then Adam Moss, who had been the editor of 7 Days, called me, because I called him and said, because I was making a big change. I was like, do you have any advice for me? And so he was, he gave me some advice. But then like 3 days later, he called me and he's like, there's a job opening at the New York Times Magazine for a story editor, covering pop culture. Like,
oh, wow.
Do you want to come talk to me and Jack Rosenthal about that? And I was like, yeah.
Wow.
No big deal.
So that's how that happened. And then from there, I was at the magazine, I think, like 5 years, and I had a revelation one day, like literally standing in my little cubicle, trying to broker interview access for a celebrity interview. And I just thought my mother, I think, had just died or was sick. And I just thought, okay, when are you going to do what you really want to do? Like, when are you going to break out? Like, you can't spend the rest of your life like this, right? Brokering for an extra half hour for a writer to talk to some famous person. I was just like, I can't. So I ended up asking if I could try to become a reporter, and Joe Lelyveld said, yes, we'll figure it out a way. And so I went